So over the weekend, Joe Biden went to, where was he? Was at Mother Emanuel? Well, yeah, Mother Emanuel Church. A couple of days ago, Joe Biden went to Mother Emanuel Church. And on yesterday, Joe Biden had tweeted something, this is a reminder that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. When he was at Mother Emanuel Church, there were a number of pro-Palestinian protesters who interrupted I don't know if you can't call it services because it wasn't a church service. Well, interrupted Biden's speech in support of the Palestinians. Joe Biden did exactly what he should have done, especially in the church. But at some point, the church, the people in the church started yelling 4 more years, 4 more years, the things that you hear in political rallies. After this, the pastor of the church of Mother Emanuel put out a statement saying that he had reminded or had asked everyone before the event began to respect the church, the sanctuary of the church. This is as Biden was giving a political speech in the very church. But I want to play something that Biden said. This was in 2000, maybe either the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021. I'm not sure if you remember that there was a conversation that Biden had with civil rights leaders. Now, the conversation somehow leaked. There was a pretty lengthy conversation. He had people like the president of the Urban League, Mark Morial, the president of the NAACP, Al Sharpton was on that list. Kamala Harris was also on that call as well. It was a virtual call. It was a Zoom call. It wasn't an in-person meeting. And I want to play what Joe Biden said in this meeting. Let's see, can we get that clip?
I didn't want to run this time. I ran this time because of the racist son of a gun who was president of the United States of America. That's why I ran. And you remember, a lot of you told me talking about the soul of America was going over people's heads. They didn't know what we're talking about. The words of a president matter. What a president says matters. And you've never seen me shy away. In the middle of the debate, I called him a racist. In the middle of the debate with him, I took on white supremacists. I'm the guy that took on every single time somebody was threatened in this country. The only white boy you know who did it.
Now, yes, you heard that right. This was part of the leak call. Notice, if you heard what Biden said, and this was a short clip, if you listen to what Joe Biden said, he didn't articulate any policy that he was going to focus on. He said, I called him out to his face. I called him a racist to his face. I called him a white supremacist. You know, all of these things that we like, you know, as far as, you know, black people, we love to hear, oh, this person is a racist, especially when it comes to Republicans. The point that I've made before, this is the strategy. Now, we can kind of, you know, poo-poo the strategy, but this has been weaponizing race has been a successful strategy of Democrats. Now, easily we can make the argument that Republicans aren't great on this, and there's plenty of room to criticize Republicans. But Republicans don't get, on average, about 90% of the black vote. They just don't. So Biden is not offering any deliverables in this. And if you listen to his speech at Mother Emanuel, I listened to the entire speech, what Biden said on some of those key things that he promised, and I would say under-delivered as far as his administration is concerned. One of the very first things that he said was that he passed, through executive order, he took action on police reform, you know, sweeping comprehensive reforms, things that he could do as the nation's top executive. Yeah, Biden did what maybe in 2022 create this commission on policing that are supposed to study all of this. But let me tell you the problem, though, and how those civil rights leaders are actually implicated in this. On that very call, they were talking about things like, for instance, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, the police commission. The very first thing that Joe Biden did upon taking office, because when he was campaigning, he promised to create a commission on policing. Now, Donald Trump, when he was in office, actually created a commission on policing as well. Obviously, these things are done by executive order, so there is only so much authority that these things have. But typically, they're meant to study an issue, give a recommendation, and that's pretty much it. When Biden got in office, the very first thing he did was to renege on his plan to create a police commission. Now, if you listen to Biden, and to be fair to Biden, which is why I'm also holding these civil rights leaders accountable, Biden said that the reason he didn't move forward with the police commission is because civil rights leaders, many of those who were definitely on that call, they said that the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act had many of the elements of what they would want in any sort of police commission. So they gave Biden a pass. They co-signed Biden not creating the commission at all. What Joe Biden said is that he wanted a bill signed in Congress, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, signed in Congress by the anniversary of George Floyd's death. So Biden isn't able to talk about the work that he did on that. He just has to blame Republicans for not moving on things like police reform, despite in June of 2020, Tim Scott led the Republican caucus, and I forgot the name of the GOP's component of police reform. Democrats and Republicans, if you look at the bills, I've done the side by side because I was reporting on them at the time. If you look at the side by side comparisons of bills, there is about 85% overlap in the bills. There are things in the Democrats' proposals that wasn't included in the Republican proposal. For instance, tackling the issue of qualified immunity. That is a big issue. My argument is that I'm fine if that's what you want to do in qualified immunity, but qualified immunity only kicks in after something happens. So, for instance, after someone dies, that's when qualified immunity, if it's eliminated, is kicked in. Yes, that will allow victims and their families to receive, maybe some sort of civil penalties, but that was the sticking point. So you agree on 85% of the bill, but because you didn't agree with those 15%, and there were different reporting requirements and things within that 15%. So Biden isn't able to say, I made any movement on that. They just have to blame Republicans. Democrats blocked Republicans from even bringing that bill to the floor, meaning they filibustered it. And if you go back and look at the speeches that were giving at that time, Tim Scott said, I offered them 9, 10 opportunities to add amendments to the bill. If they allow the bill to go to the floor, it went nowhere because Democrats filibustered it. Now, by the time of, Biden gets in office and they're negotiating the police reform bill, qualified immunity at the beginning of the negotiations was already off the table. It was understood with Chuck Schumer and GOP leaders that qualified immunity was off the table. So one of the very big things that we hear now as far as police reform, it wasn't even supposed to be in the final negotiations, and it wasn't. The thing that became the sticking point, though, was the reporting requirements, and this is where Republicans were hypocrites. Because the very thing that they supported, and these reporting requirements, there is I can't think of the organization. There is an organization that credentials, police departments and officers around the country, which requires like the reporting requirements. Those things that Trump supported were in the original GOP police reform bill. But by the time got in office, Republicans no longer supported it. Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy in that. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of hypocrisy in that. But the point here is that Biden has nothing else to run on. So the only thing that Biden is able to do is the things that he knows that the Democrats have been successful. Convincing convincing voters that Republicans are evil. In 2008, you remember, if you don't, John Lewis compared John McCain to George Wallace standing in the schoolhouse door. This is John Lewis. In 2012, John Lewis compared Mitt Romney to segregationists. This is what John Lewis said. Now, this is as vanilla can get Romney. The Romney that many on the left now support because he's spoken out against Donald Trump. That's why they embrace him in the same way that they embrace Liz Cheney. But Democrats are changing their tune, and they realize that Joe Biden going into this cycle where the polling isn't looking too good for Joe Biden, they're afraid, and they should be afraid. They should be afraid because for years, they've continued to overpromise and underdeliver when it comes to the black community. And this Biden time in office, what I'm actually hoping is that we now are, we choose, and I'm saying black people, we collectively revisit, we understand how this political game works and the things that a government does versus what a government does not do. And I think that is the realization that the Biden team is actually grappling with. Sure, they can say because of the economy, black people benefited from this. Because of what we're doing around prescription drugs and things that black people ultimately benefited from this. The things that around minority business development that black people ultimately benefit from this. All of these things are actually valid. And if you listen to Jim Clyburn recently, he gave a masterclass on how these things impact black people. Yes, he's right. Lowering prescription drug costs helps black people who may have, financially challenged or otherwise. But it is a rising tide lifts all boat approach. The very thing I would argue that Democrats have said, that's what Republicans, they don't care about black people. Well, according to what this administration is articulating, neither do they. But, we'll see what happens. As I said, Biden has no other choice, literally no other choice, but to go race. And if past is prologue, he's going to have a bit of success in that. So don't be confused or don't just believe all of these numbers that's talking about how black voters are moving against Joe Biden. No, we heard in that church 4 more years. And I think that that's going to be the strategy for Biden and black people within the Democratic Party.